Hello, everybody. Good morning on this in Cape Town. It's a wintry, rainy day. I hope wherever you are, you're cozy. And what a way to start a morning with the time of the Writer Festival. This morning, I'll be chatting with some theatre practitioners, some writers, and some researchers about a really interesting initiative. But just good morning and hi, my name is Nina. I am a researcher at Stellenbosch University, and my inquiry is into sustainable development. And part of that inquiry is also very much thinking about the urban space and the urban landscape and governance and regulation and how we make a place together. And I think this is what really drew me to this initiative and to how the people involved in this are thinking about this inquiry. So, hi, and I am joined by Alex Haligi and Letzi Tsatsi, Jade Bowers, and Anders Johansson, who all tell us a little bit more about this initiative and kind of how it all comes together for us to understand what they're up to and what space they're inviting us in to think about creative practice and the city. So Alex, I'd like to start off with you as a leader of this research project, and also somebody who brought all of the kind of conceptual threads together, inviting so many people to collaborate with you. Can you just briefly introduce yourself, your role in the project? And there's also a question, since we're involved in the time of the Writer Festival, what the role of creative writing is in this project. You're on mute, Alex.
Thanks, Nina. I was diligently on mute and then not diligently unmuting myself. So my name is Alex Haligi, and I am a research fellow at the Johannesburg Institute for Advanced Study, which is an interdisciplinary research unit at the University of Johannesburg. My background is in theatre making, and my PhD was through UCT, the African Centre of Cities in the Drama Department, which sort of sums up my research interests, which are in how we can use particularly live performance, creative practice generally, but particularly live performance in theatre, to consider placemaking in complex ways. And certainly this is not placemaking in the sense of initiatives to get people to buy into a place, but rather placemaking in the sense in which we are all daily placemaking, in the ways we talk, walk, drive, move, act, where we eat, how we interact through space, and in relation to one another, in relation to objects, in relation to the built environment. So I conceived of this project sort of as I was towards the end of finishing my PhD, and my PhD project was a site-specific participatory public art process that I did in an inner city suburb in Johannesburg, a little cluster of 3 very old suburbs, Bertram's, Lawrenceville, and Judith's Paarl. And it involved a year-long participatory engagement with residents of the area, and then it resulted in a theatre work. And this was working to this idea I had that there's something productive between playmaking and placemaking, that placemaking involves embodied actions through space in relation to other people and things, and that playmaking does a very similar thing, although it's contained as an art form. And that the containment of the art form and the heightened fictive nature of the art form, I thought might be a productive way of intersecting with place to understand the ways in which we're making place and to reflect on it critically, with love, with attention, to support what's working and to maybe put a little bit of a spotlight on that which isn't working and to find ways in which we might be able to shift it. So towards the end of my PhD process, I got interested in how much writing there is on the city. And I've always been, I am a writer myself, and interested in writing as a creative medium, although my primary professional one is theatre. So I got interested in this idea of how about if we drew the literary into this idea of play and placemaking, so that you might be inspired by something you see on the street in your world, and that you distill that into some form of creative writing as a way of capturing it, as a way of saying, here, look at this moment. And then how much you take that piece of writing, make a play that brings it back into the embodied moment, but through another artistic form that keeps that heightened sense of look here. And it also brings it back to that everyday space which inspired the creative writing. And my hope is that there again, that it's kind of, it lengthens this dialogue or extends this dialogue, that you have this loop or this cycle of being in the everyday of the city, being invited to express something through creative writing to it, taking that creative writing into the embodied practice of theatre, and then that inspires a dialogue about the everyday placemaking. So with that in mind, I've been having conversations over the years with many people, and this has finally come together into an opportunity to pilot this project with UJ Arts and Culture, with the support of JIAS, and with the collaboration of Anders Hansen from Malmö University, and Anders's MA students who are looking at communication and development. I've spoken a lot, so I'm just going to briefly say, how am I seeing creative writing? And I've interacting with this project and being key to this project. And I mean, I think I've already expressed this to some extent, but just to point it more definitively, that I'm interested in how creative writing offers space for people to articulate their imaginaries of the city, what they're experiencing, and how that plays out in their mind. And that then that allows an extension of dialoguing with the everyday of the city in ways that I hope are productive.
Okay.
Thank you, Nina.
Wow, thanks, Alex. That's very expansive and complex and nuanced to be thinking of all of those kind of practices and places. And I really love this relationship that you speak about playmaking and placemaking. And we'll talk a little bit later to Jade, just how she is going to manage that dance, that translation, and also that what you're looking for through the creative writing and extended into the playmaking is kind of a moment, an experience, or a vision of the city that becomes distilled, that we can look at without just trying to understand a big city landscape, or how we often think about cities as a trope, right? But something more embodied and alive. So thanks, Alex. Thanks for that introduction. Jade, I'm going to come to you. Jade Bowers is a theatre maker, and Jade, you can tell us what else you do, and your role in this project particularly, and how you understand creative writing as almost the first synthesis of the concerns of this project.
Okay, hi, I'm Jade, excuse me. And I am the resident director at UJ Arts and Culture. So as part of the partnership that Alex has, I've been asked to direct the piece. And coming into it, I'm very much a yes person, sometimes to my detriment. I get very excited about projects. But this one in particular really caught my interest because it's storytelling, and I think one of the biggest things in theater and in creative writing is storytelling. So how these things connect in different kind of forms and genres is really what interests me, in all different types of storytelling. So sorry, I'm looking at what I wrote down. So this project is another way to explore that for me, from as many different perspectives as possible. From the writing process with the people who have written these beautiful pieces, these moments of Joburg, of Johannesburg, whether it's in a play, a poem, prose, captures mood, movement, energy in a different way, and tells that story. And then from the creatives in the space creating this devised work, they will each have their own perspectives and their own stories of Johannesburg, which are then incorporated into this story. Then the researchers who are coming, some are coming from overseas, some are from Johannesburg, how their interactions with Johannesburg, with the actors, with the space, creates new stories of Johannesburg. And all of these stories are kind of like layered on top of each other with the space, with the people who live in the space, who interact with that space every day. So that's what's exciting for me, is like the storytelling of Johannesburg through its people, through its visitors, and through the energy of the space. I hope I answered all of your questions.
Yes, you did. Thanks.
Great.
Thanks, Jade. Yeah, and it seems like you're very much going to be at the interface of translation. As a director, helping all of the participants reflect their voice. So from the writers, as creative writers, inputting and providing kind of the primary material from which this devised piece is going to arise, emerge. And then the translation of this theatre piece being a site-specific piece, and then all of the other participants who are also feeding into process and meaning-making. So I can completely understand your yes. It's a very exciting prospect. Yeah, and I think really wonderful perspectives to weave together for a rich product. So thanks, Jade. I'm going to ask Letzi next. Letzi, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your role in this project, and how creative writing is really at the center of your world, it sounds.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Nina. So I am a storyteller. I'm a professional storyteller. And I am somebody who came into Joburg as the first city I've ever lived in. So my interest in the city has always been to observe and to write about it. And in various ways, I write about taking the taxi, I write about the landscape of the city, I write about, just living in the city. So as a part of the judging committee, my interest was to kind of find the redeeming about Joburg, to see if the Joburg that I know and live in has been seen by other people, because I walk through the city a lot. So I was looking at somebody who's walking the city quite intimately and seeing it in its everyday life. As Alice spoke about, placemaking and space making, it's the daily activities that kind of make this space for me, and how I came into understanding Joburg. So my interest in the city has been, okay, this is this historical place that a lot of things have happened in, but it has changed now, and to have been in the city, to have done tours in the city, and to just hear this one narrative of how dangerous it is. I was looking at a story that's not a dangerous story. I was looking at a story where families have lived there, where people are born there, where there's softness that has lived in the city beyond the violence that we have come to know and have come to see in the news or in other media platforms. So my interest in the city has been, before I moved to Joburg, coming from Kurman, I read extensively about it. I read about, the parties that took place. I read about the music. I read about the landscape. And I went into the city searching for that. And I kind of went into the story searching for that as well, to see if there is that nuanced narrative where it's not just all bad and dangerous, but there is something quite soft here. There is love to be found in the city. You can witness the most beautiful of sunsets here because of the skyscrapers. There are families who are born here. There is a language that you can learn here. So I guess I was looking for that. If somebody, especially people who live in the city, if they are being conscious about the story that they are telling, the story that they want to hear out there, and maybe to see if that glimpse of Joburg that I read about when I was a little girl is still there somehow. If that light is not completely shattered, it's still alive. So I guess, and also as a storyteller, to see if people are taking interest in the beauty of the city, because it's really beautiful. There's a lot of investment that went into building it. When you look at the architecture of the place, it's quite stunning. I love it a lot. And even beyond the dirt, and even beyond the violence, and even beyond the unsafety, is there somebody who's looking, let's say, at the Johannesburg Library and thinking, oh my goodness, this is beautiful. Or if there's anybody who's looking at the old post office and thinking, oh my word, this used to be the only place that people used to get mail into this place, to see if that fascination is still there, and maybe if it can carry forward, the legacy of the city, and participate in what it's becoming now. So, and a lot of the writing was quite satisfying in that sense. To hear young people writing about the city that they are now living in, being the teenagers who are finding love in the place, being the people whose forefathers have lived and made this place, being a place where really its pace and its beat is kind of so centered in everything that is being spoken about it. Even the love that is found in the city is quite fast paced. Even, the sunset kind of goes down a little bit quicker, to see how true the city kind of becomes to itself over the course of time. So for me, that was my interest, to see if the Joburg of the books that I read still exists, if the Joburg that I have walked still exists, but if the Joburg that I imagine the future to be is still there and somebody else is dreaming it out.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Letzi. So we understand then that the pool of writers who contributed, they are young people from Johannesburg, who have taken this creative writing challenge and brief to explore their experience of the city. And I really love how you're giving us a window into what it is you were perhaps looking for. I noticed very much that both you and Alex talk about the everyday, kind of the routinized ways that we go about our lives, where we walk, where we shop, what we eat, who our friends are, where we hang out, and how awake that is to being a generative person, being a producer of a place. We often don't think about, I think, ourselves that way, because of the way that we understand cities. So thanks, Letzi, for just sharing a bit of that vitality and that understanding of the urban landscape. Anders, I'd like to come to you. You are co-researcher with Alex. You're based at Malmö University in Denmark, and you're coming in with a very particular research interest and a set of thematic skills and expertise. Can you tell us a little bit about how this collaboration happens and what it is that excites you about this project?
Hello, everybody. I'm Anders Hansen from School of Arts and Communication, Malmö University in Sweden. In fact, it's just across the bridge from Copenhagen. We have many Danes also working here in Sweden. Yes, I have worked for a number of years on a hybrid education program called Communication for Development, which gathers students from around the world, including South Africans and so on. And it also brought us to South Africa a few times during my work. In 2014, I was in Cape Town. I have never been to Joburg, and I of course come into this project with a lot of humility and curiosity to learn more about this society, which has a certain intensity. Let me put it that way, as an outsider. I have kind of researched widely on art and social change and popular memory in various contexts in Europe, in Tanzania, in Mozambique. Yeah, so I have some experience with Africa and what we could call the way that we educate and learn and change through art and so on, and informal education. And what I'm intrigued about in this project is, I heard about the project through a colleague, and then I contacted Alex. I mean, I had this kind of idea that you have these kind of pockets of writing about a city, these kind of everyday kind of experiences, which is transformed into stories. We could also call it kind of a society's kind of contemporary history from below, which often are in tension with more kind of formal collective memory or collective history, which is written often from above by specialists and so on, by scholars and so on, which tend to kind of shape certain kind of dominating narratives about the city or society. But here you have this kind of multitude of hidden histories, and then you work with it and you adapt it, you transform it into another art form, and you meet on the streets of the city, and there's potential kind of interaction and learning between direct actors and also the students who are brought into the project. And the students is quite important for me, that we could bring in students on site. Alex and I got together, and Alex was able to raise money from various in South Africa, and I was able to do some applications here in Sweden and so on. So I thought it was really nice kind of collaboration, also in terms of support, not just from one side. So we're also excited to bring Johannesburg and Malmö students together to observe and inquire and analyze and so on, and learn and listen. So we're very kind of it's a little bit experimental. Alex has some experience with similar projects, but it's also important for me that the writing doesn't disappear. It's transformed into theater, and maybe we transform it further into to essays, to scenes, into journals and so on. It kind of lives on in different formats, yeah. Okay, I think I'll stop.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anders. Alex, what is your impression of hearing everybody's voices articulating the project of the Johannesburg Literary Site-Specific Theatre Project in this way? Kind of people's insights, excitement, kind of pets, attractions into the space.
It's so wonderful, Nina, because firstly, hearing things that I have thought and haven't articulated yet, but then hearing them come up that other people are already thinking them is so inspiring. And so I had a very specific experience that with Jade, talking about how when the performers come into the space, they bring new perspectives, and how the researchers, everybody's bringing different perspectives. So, that's exactly the richness of it. And so hearing everybody speaking is that feeling of like, oh, this is creating a little platform for everybody to bring to share in what they're thinking and dialogue together, and how valuable that is, that it is, then you've got multiple perspectives, you've got collaborative thinking, feeling, making, and then I think we start to work with the everyday of the city in much kinder, more complex and interesting ways when we're doing that.
I'm interested in how the young writers from the Windy Brow Arts Center, how they were invited in, like what kind of brief did you give them? Because often, especially I think if you're a young person and you're entering a competition, you want to like write the biggest, most extravagant happening or event, or you know, that it must be like big. But the ways that you've been talking about it, the ways Letsy's been talking about it, is that what you're also looking for is like the life of the city through ordinary things, how this urban landscape that we can see as a monolith is enlivened by very small actions and everybody's contribution to placemaking, to making the city. How did you invite these young people in, not to set them up for writing about like, you know, a big thing?
So, Nina, first of all, I think it might also be useful, and I realize I should have done this when I first spoke, but it's just to very briefly explain the structure of the project, because I'm realizing that listeners and viewers might not know. So the project started with a writing competition in October last year, and final entries came in December, and then we selected 3 winning writers. And that call was a broad call that went out across literary, creative arts networks, you know, all the various universities people in the project were connected to, you know, so it was a broad call and not targeting any specific age group or group of people. Then the 3 winning texts, Jade will be using as inspiration to devise a theatre work in collaboration with an ensemble of professional performers and a group of poets, Jade. And are they spoken word poets, or is it poetry more generally? Anyway, a group of young poets.
Spoken word and poetry generally.
And
sorry, we'll be working with the Doornfontein poetry students with arts and culture. We have an extramural program where we do poetry, dance, drama, and particularly with the inner city campus, we're going to be working with those students.
Brilliant. So that's through UJ. So UJ's poetry group and the professional actors to then devise this piece that's inspired by the 3 written texts. In that process, we've got 2 postgraduate students from UJ, 1 postgraduate student from Wits, 3 MA students from Malmö University, and the ones that are based in Joburg will be engaging with the process with a particular research question of their interest, starting from this next week. And in the last week of rehearsals going into performances, we have the 3 Malmö University students coming over to Joburg, though there would have been an online engagement throughout the rehearsal process. And then we have so the performance is finished, but then we have an online seminar, which will be between UJ postgrad students and Malmö postgrad students to discuss the work, to look at material that's been generated in terms of film, a blog site we'll be running. So for kind of an ongoing engagement with what the work offers, what it did. And then as Anders spoke about the afterlife, both of the project as a whole, I mean, Anders and I will be producing articles, as will the students who've been researching the project. But we will also look for platforms to publish writing from the new writing competition, to find ways of incorporating or speaking about it in different platforms, and not just scholarly, but also looking at online platforms, popular literature forms, and so on.
Okay.
So having given that context, then you asked about what was the brief or the prompt to to engage the writing. So the prompt was 3,500 words or less, any kind of form of creative writing. It didn't have to be prose, it didn't have to be poetry, and to express your experiences of Johannesburg. So Nina, we did in the end get mainly young people. There were some older writers who wrote in, and we had quite a wide selection. We had some very young writers who are younger than 18. And I would say probably the majority were in kind of their 20s and 30s. So it was interesting because exactly as Letzi and I've spoken to, and as you summarized so well, that we were interested in the ordinary experiences, the ways in which we're placemaking daily, routinely. I love that word you used, the routinization of placemaking. And if we did this again, so I mean, it's also important to frame that this is a pilot project. We're testing things. So the Windy Brow, Gerard Bester, who's head of the Windy Brow, was able to organize a workshop for their young people who are involved in after-school programs there. And Sibongile Fisher, who is an amazing writer and a contemporary of Letzi's, facilitated a workshop with them. And it was really interesting to hear her feedback. She said how exactly people wanted to do grand, big narratives. They were also very interested in representing Joburg in a way that it's represented in the news and the media. And encouraging them to articulate the small textures of their daily experiences. It took quite a bit of work. And I would say all the entries that we got in were testimony to that. Some more experienced writers, some writers who'd been published, although the remit with the competition was for people who had not been previously published, but we nonetheless got entries from people who had been published. People who were more experienced writers did go for a more textured, more small, everyday approach. And I think if we were to do this again, I would say we shouldn't do a writing competition, or at least the writing competition would be some very far thing at the end of the process, but that we find ways of doing workshops that facilitate people in an understanding of your daily experience is what we're looking to articulate and express.
I'm going to ask Letzi, as a member of the selection panel, you chose 3 winning entries. What made them winning? What was the thing that they answered for you to say, yes, these are the 3?
So in a lot of the work, we came across work that had been written for another purpose. And once the call was made to write about Johannesburg specifically, that was slotted in. Your people would write a street name that it's a common street name in Johannesburg, or they will name drop a place that is a Johannesburg place. What we were looking for is an authentic narrative, is something that is really written for this very purpose, like the city for us. And I think one of the things that we also looked at was promise. Is this person kind of picking at the right thing? Are they seeing this city that we would like them to look at? And is there something that we can do, to kind of better their writing, to empower them more, to write more beautifully about the city already? And I think also just not uniqueness or authenticity necessarily, but I mean, one of the winners wrote a poem about Johannesburg that could easily be a poem that was written many, many years ago, but it was so innocent. This is really, it was such a fresh perspective. And it's one of the writers who came from Windy Brow, actually. It was so innocent in the way that they wrote about the city. That's what they really, really saw. And maybe this is somebody who in the future you could say, open your eyes to see something else. There was that potential that they had seen something and they could see more. Just different characters, or just something that captures the city so clearly, which is not just a street name. There's a very particular way that the sun lands in Johannesburg. There's a very particular way that your body moves when it's moving in the city, when we're looking at those everyday things. For me, the writings that won kind of captured the daily making of the city, because as much as Joburg is a big place, and you want to write a big story about a big place where all these historic events have happened, it did not come about that day. Once, if we look at maybe, let's say, the 1976 story, if you really trace it back, you'll find out that a mother had to go register a child in school first. That child had to go to school, and then they had to make friends. And then at lunchtime, they sat together and they started saying, do you enjoy when you taught in this language? And then that conversation started. And then it became something else. It did not just start with a riot. It did not just start with a massacre. It did not just, there was once just a painful start. And that is what we were looking for. Where is this? What informs this narrative? Where's this starting from? Where's this perspective? Because when we set ourselves out to tell a big story, we miss out the small story of the people who make the big story. And for me, as a storyteller, the simplicity of narrative is my most preferred kind of prompt, to start with the most simple. And the stories that we looked at, the stories that are chosen then in the end, was starting with something quite simple. Because something quite simple starts everywhere, you know, it's not unique to Johannesburg. And I think it's quite important for us to say, yes, it's a big city, and yes, all of these things have happened here, and yes, it's metropolitan and all of these things, but we can really demystify the city by saying, not everything is unique to the city. This could be anywhere. If we remove the setting, it could easily be in Kuruman, you know, it could easily be, I don't know, in Potchefstroom. That takes away the intimidation that people have when they think about the city. You know, the more we write about it in simple ways, you know, with that innocence, it becomes a little bit more inviting for others to say, maybe I want to go study in Johannesburg myself. Oh yeah, maybe I can go to city. It's not so big and dangerous. It's a place that you can access. And for us to know that places are places that we have access to, is the everyday life. Somebody stops in the city to buy food from the big mama who sells at the corner. People do that in Kuruman too. People do that in Pretoria too. People do that in Cape Town too. And just by noting those everyday, simple, daily living things, we start to think, this is ours too, you know. And because I feel so precious about Joburg, I want other people to feel that way about it too. Like, I can walk in the streets of Joburg, and for me to have that confidence, I used to walk Joburg at night just to see what it looked like at night, because I had read books that spoke about what it looked like at night. I felt safe to go into it. If the writer had felt safe to document this for me, I could also, you know, it felt like permission. And for me, the stories that I was looking for were stories that gave, I think overall, the entire will look at stories that gave permission to people access the city, not intimidated by it, but to come and see it for themselves. Because people hear stories and they hear narratives and they've never set a foot in the city in like 20 years. And we've had those experiences with the tours that I have done, where people come to the city that 15 years later, like, oh, for real? It's like this. I'm like, yeah. That's why we need to do this work, to let people know it's okay for you to come here, to come and see what's going on here, to come and learn new languages, to come and eat new food, to come and see new people. There are people that you've never seen that are gathered here and see that all from to come and see the beauty of it. And the stories I think that we chose were stories that gave that permission and that extended that invitation. This is your city. You can come into it. It's safe here. It's not only safe, but you know, for a brief moment, you can suspend the unsafety.
Okay. Thanks, Letzi. It's really wonderful to know that young people also have this view and this experience of a reimagined space, and that they have a sense of agency about it as well. In the ways that they wrote about it, in the ways that they're reimagining it. And I'm very struck by this idea of placemaking as an expression of a collective vision and of some sense of collaboration, whether that be intentional or whether it just be kind of the ways that we interact and participate in our collective life. And Jade, this is where your work is going to be so critical, because this idea of placemaking and theatre making becomes really heightened and concentrated in the ways that we understand site-specific theatre making. And I'm wondering if you could just bring us into the ways of thinking about how you work with an existing site. You're devising a piece that is adapted and translated from these young people's visions and voices into a living space. It's not as if you conceptualize a piece from the creative writing in a rehearsal room somewhere and you move into the space and it's site specific, right? There are very particular kinds of nuances and process when you work in the site specific way. And it would be nice just to talk us through the site that you've chosen and how you came to that and how the process will unfold from here in this very deeply collaborative way.
It's a very good question, Nina. I mean, we were speaking a little bit about this before the panel. It's complicated for many reasons, I think. Because we are this, so yes, the site we've chosen is close to the DFC campus, which is the Doornfontein campus of UJ. Because we were looking for a site that was as inner city as we could get, and yet also be able to draw on the resources of the university to make the performance happen. So yeah, in choosing the site, there were a lot of also logistical concerns. You know, I think all of us as artists, especially when you're trying to do this type of work, the site you really want to choose is like the most impractical site that you could possibly find, like at the top of Ponte or something, you know, because that would be the most picturesque of Johannesburg. But no, we had to take in some very real logistical and safety concerns for the audience, for the actors, for everyone involved, especially also with equipment and that kind of things which would need on the street. So we've found a space that kind of fits all of the boxes for the university as well as for the artists. Which is a beautiful little space right outside the Doornfontein campus, on quite a heavy transport route. So there's lots of taxis, it's just outside the gate of campus, so there's a little bit of space where we don't have to be in the street. There's a hotel there, there's people selling food. It felt very vibrant, it felt city-esque, it felt part of the student life, because we're also dealing with our students who are currently studying there, who are living in and around the city, whether they are from Joburg or from wherever else in the country or internationally. I mean, that is one of the best things about Joburg, I think. It's this like melting pot of people and cultures and from all over, you know, and from all over Africa, which is also great. So maybe something in there being very African, like because of the mix mash of so many African cultures in one space. Mm-hmm. And I'm digressing, sorry, because we got very excited. But so it's a beautiful little space there. And that is how we chose it. It was a lot of logistical concerns, which is sometimes grating, but also good in its limitations, I think. I think sometimes as artists, we need the limitations in order to explore without going a little bit all over the place.
Mm-hmm. And then how you work in terms of process to create a site-specific work, you know, like you have to be immersed in that space to understand it, how you move, how you relate to it, and how it shapes you. And for me, this is a beautiful echo of kind of the meta concern and dynamic in this project, is that while we make place also makes us. And this is particularly important when you're making a site-specific work.
For sure. And we are going to try our best. Let me put it that way. But yes, so a lot of the process needs to come from the site. We're looking into the history of the space. We're looking into, did you know that there is a river that flows through Doornfontein? And that is a big source of the water in the city. It's a beautiful, yeah, who knew? And right there where we are is one of the spots. So yes, looking into the history, looking into the space, the people around the space, what the buildings were before, what they've become, you know, trying to really be immersed in the space and its people. The start of the process is going to happen in the site, like kind of gathering data and energies of the space. We were talking about how hippie it tends to get, but yes, it is. It's all about energy, and feeling the energy of the space and the layers of story again, because, you know, Joburg started as a little hick town. So like the layers of ancestry and people who have lived and moved in that space, and trying to pay homage to that it feels a big responsibility. And I think in order to make it relevant to us is to be as specific as possible. And I think as the more specific you get, the more it speaks to a wider narrative, and to find the specificity of that space. Even though we're going to be rehearsing in a rehearsal room, trying to bring that space into the rehearsal room from the beginning of the process. But yes, site specific is hard, and I'm scared. I haven't done it since like study days, which, you know, reminds me how old I am getting, because it feels further and further away. So I'm excited to re-explore that, and I'm excited to do that with the cast and the people around me, because that is the collaboration. Everyone will see and feel slightly differently of the space, and what they will bring into the space will tell us what story we're going to tell.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, Jade.
Thank you.
Thanks. And is perhaps, you know, what we also deal so much with is in an academic frame, thinking about placemaking is the physical, the cultural, the social identities that come together, that talk to each other and express themselves in how a city or a place lives and breathes. And there are so many elements and people and a global kind of participation in this work. When you said earlier that you come with a particular humility and curiosity in how you approach this project, could you tell us a little bit more about that? You know, there are very particular ways that we can read into the work, you know, to try and enliven and propose a reimagined space. And when you're coming to it and from a place very far away, how do you interact, and your students who come with you?
Yeah, thank you for this important and difficult question. First of all, it's important to document this process and event in numerous ways, and also in numerous genres, not just through kind of a conventional kind of academic discourse. I mean, the students will be writing their essays or thesis and so on, and they also come from different backgrounds. One is Californian, one is Italian, and then there's an Austrian. I come from my background and so on. The Joburg students might come from different places in South Africa also, and so and then you have the actors, you have the audiences, you have the director, and so on, and we hope for some kind of exchange and learning engagement between these different positions and so on, and experiences, and also in relation to the initial texts and the writers and so on, and to document it in, as I said, not just academically, but also in maybe photo essays, maybe new forms of writing, raw ethnographic footage. There'll be a documentary film, a short documentary film as well, which we were able to arrange. And there are these kind of educational events with Joburg and Malmö students, the 4th of May. And there are future kind of, there are blogs and so on, there's social media and so on. But it's really going to be interesting to see what kind of footprint it would make, but hopefully it will inspire new writing and similar kind of events in other cities. So we don't really know what direction this living organism will take.
Yes, yeah.
Mm.
It feels kind of like an experiment in like radical emergence, you know, from this very beautiful prompt to a group of young creative writers to this very expansive collaboration, for sure. Thank you. Alex, I wonder if you have a closing word. We're coming to the end of our time, and maybe a concluding remark about what you hope for, what you're inviting us to read into the work.
Thank you, Nina. And this radical emergence, what a gift of a phrase. I mean, and that is my hope for the work, that it holds space for many people to dialogue about what they're loving about the city, what they're finding frustrating, and to see their own roles in community in terms of placemaking the city. That's my dream, and that out of that, you know, conversations will happen, and from the conversations, actions, and we see what emerges.
Okay. Great.
Thanks,
you.
Nina.
Thanks, Alex. Jade and Letzi, if there's anything that you're really hoping people who are part of the creative process or who are involved as audience makers or even logistics people, just in any way that we can touch the work, what are you hoping that we're come away with?
I'm hoping, what am I hoping? I'm hoping that there becomes a multitude of stories, a multitude of, or maybe an awareness of a multitude of stories of Johannesburg. Whether it's, you know, even research is a story. When you're writing a report of research, it's a story, you know, so all of these stories coming out of one moment in time and place, it's beautiful. So that is my hope, that there are multitudes of stories that expand, you know, worldwide.
Lovely. Thanks, Jade. Let's see.
So a couple of months back, I realized that there's a traditional Tswana story called Tselani. It's a big ogre and this little girl whose mother sings her a song. This is a story that if you're a Tswana child, you grew up with it. And my grandmother used to tell me that story many, many times. It's only about 2 years ago that I started to find my own meaning of the story, to really look at the story and what it meant. It wasn't just a little girl attacking also about knowing your mother's original song and, you know, being safe from the ogres of the world. But I used to tell the version that my grandmother used to tell me, which was the innocent version. And I want to read for us Zandile's poem because it feels like a child telling the first retelling of a story that their grandmother had told them in that innocence. And I hope that as the project becomes, we start to look at the grandmother's version against our own version and have a deeper understanding of the Johannesburg that we live in. It says, he is a city of crime with no remorse. He gives no sense of safety and he never answers the call. I thought he would change, grow butterfly wings and evolve. Yes, he is my dangerous home, housing clipped wings, a face of but unglamorous as the light suggests. He has consumed my energy, flicked my light. Take me back to the golden days when I never thought of running away from him, when I thought he would forever be my safe place, when I thought he would be resolved. But now I am old enough and I know not to be involved. I want to run away from him, but I keep falling into the pit he has dug out for me. He enjoys my suffering, relishes the helplessness that slowly swallows me. I came from the south to get gold, but only caught the cold. We are suffering and he does not seem to care. Our homelessness has made us bare. Our mothers wake up every day to make sure we are fed. No one seems to notice that we are getting older. They seem to think they are young and are getting bolder. He was once in his prime, tall and sublime. He, Johannesburg, is now a city of crime. He, Johannesburg, is a city of golden treasures, but he is dirty and can never be restored. He is not at fault. We are. He is dying along with our hopes and dreams, and he takes while we take until one day when he, Johannesburg, will be no more. This is such an innocent poem, but this is not Zandile's original story, I think. I think this is a story that he has heard from the adults around her, you know, from the stories that are told of the city, but already this is the story that lives in her mind. I hope that the project helps these kind of narratives to be challenged, for others to think, what is really the Johannesburg that I'm living in? Not the Johannesburg of my parents, not the Johannesburg of my forefathers, but the one that I'm present in. And yeah, that's, I hope, comes out of this. More story, like Jade is saying.
More story. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. It's been a really fascinating, generative conversation. I know I've understood much more your very beautiful ambitions in coming together, and also just a really sincere inquiry into our shared cultural collective life, you know, and how we very easily slip into single stories about ourselves in a place, single stories about a place, and also about the ways that we participate in that place. And so I really hear this desire to reimagine, especially let's see, with your prompt about what else can we see and what else can we live, and coming at a really important time, I think, in our country and in our global community, to be searching for those spaces of thriving and reimagining. So I'm wishing you all ambitious and beautiful and creative and talented people a wonderful process, and the most rewarding and enriching exchange between all of you, and looking forward to the performance and the other products that will come from this. Yes, wishing you all well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nina. And thank you so much for such wonderful moderation.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks, Nina. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to the Time of the Writer and the festival. I hope everyone else has a really wonderful day. Enjoy all these delicious